My wife cheated on me with her boss, stole $250, $0 from our joint account to buy a house with him, and now she's suing me for half the property. How did everything spiral into a courtroom nightmare? I never thought I'd find myself in a situation like this, but here I am, trying to make sense of everything that's happened. It all started with a gut feeling, something off that I couldn't quite put my finger on. My wife Emily had always been a little high maintenance. She liked her designer clothes, her fancy dinners, and she was pretty good at hiding her emotions when she didn't want me to see her upset. But over the past few months, she'd become more distant, more secretive. Little things, you know. She'd hide her phone when I came into the room, change her passwords, and suddenly started taking long business trips that she insisted were just work-related. At first, I thought maybe she was just stressed at her job. Emily worked as a marketing executive at this big firm downtown, and her boss, Mark, was always around her. I knew they had a close working relationship, but I trusted her. I really did, or at least I thought I did. Then one day I stumbled across an email on her laptop that made my stomach turn. It was from Mark, and it was pretty explicit. They were planning to meet up that weekend, and he was calling her darling and sweetheart. My heart sank. I couldn't believe what I was reading. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. I didn't even know how to react. I was angry, hurt, confused all at once. I mean, I knew Emily was attractive, but I never thought she'd cheat on me, not with her boss, not with someone like Mark. He's a slick guy, always dressed sharp, the kind of guy who oozes charm but also looks like he's hiding a lot of secrets himself. I didn't confront her right away. Honestly, I didn't know how. I spent the whole night trying to process it. The next morning, I decided I needed to check her phone, her emails, anything I could find. I wasn't going to wait around for her to slip up again. What I found was worse: text messages, photos, even a plan to buy a house together. A house. With him. And not just any house. This was a serious investment. Turns out Emily had stolen $250, $0 from our joint account. I mean, she drained our savings, our retirement fund, everything to buy a place with Mark. I couldn't believe it. When I confronted her about the money, her reaction was unbelievable. She told me I was overreacting, that it was all just a misunderstanding, that I was paranoid. She said she needed the house for her career, that Mark was just a friend trying to help her get ahead. That she loved me, but she also loved her career and her freedom. She called me possessive when I asked her where the money came from, said I was just jealous. I felt like I'd been hit by a freight train. How could she lie so easily? How could she betray me like that? The woman I married, the woman I loved, was out there sleeping with her boss and stealing our life savings. That moment, everything changed. I realized I was living with a stranger. I started to see the cracks in our marriage, the lies behind her eyes. I felt a mixture of rage and sadness so intense, I didn't know how to contain it. I'd always thought we had a future, a life together. Now I wasn't so sure. The trust was shattered, and I knew I had to do something. I couldn't let her get away with this. I had to find a way to fight back, to make her pay for what she'd done. But I had no idea where to start, only that my world was crumbling and I'd better brace myself for what was coming next. After finding out about the affair and the stolen money, I felt like I was in some kind of nightmare I couldn't wake up from. The betrayal cut deeper than anything I'd ever experienced. I kept replaying everything in my head: her lies, her dismissive attitude, the way she looked at me like I was just some obstacle in her path. I couldn't believe I'd been so blind, so trusting. How could she do this to me, to us? We had a life planned out, a future that I thought was solid. And now it was all falling apart. The first thing I did was dig through her phone, trying to find some proof, some explanation. I found a string of messages from Mark, more than I expected, some even more explicit than the email. They were talking about meeting up, about closing the deal on the house, about their plans to leave town together. It was disgusting. But what hit me hardest was a message where Emily told Mark she was tired of pretending, that she wanted to leave me and start fresh, that she was tired of living in this boring life with me. I felt a cold rush of rage. How dare she call our life boring when she was out there sleeping with her boss and stealing from us? I needed to confront her. I couldn't sit on this anymore. I waited until she was home from work and I asked her to sit down. Her face was tight, defensive. She knew I had uncovered something. I told her I knew about the affair, the money, everything. Her reaction was instant. She scoffed, rolled her eyes, and started lying, of course. She said I was paranoid, that Mark was just a friend, that I was overreacting. She said I was jealous and insecure, that her relationship with Mark was purely professional, that I was imagining things. She even had the audacity to accuse me of spying on her, saying I was crazy for going through her phone. But I had enough. I pulled out the emails, the messages, the bank statements. I showed her the evidence. Her face went pale, then red with anger. She started yelling, calling me paranoid, accusing me of trying to ruin her career, of being a jealous husband who couldn't handle her success. She said I was a control freak and that she deserved to be happy, that she was tired of pretending to love me when she'd already made her choice. Her words hit me like punches. I felt a mix of anger, sadness, and betrayal boiling inside me. I'd given her everything, my love, my trust, my savings, and she'd given me nothing but lies and betrayal in return. What followed was a whirlwind of emotions. I was furious, yes, but also crushed. I kept asking myself where I went wrong, how I missed all the signs. I had this sinking feeling that I was just a placeholder for her real life with Mark, a man she clearly wanted to be with. I was the fool who thought we had something real. Now I was just a guy left holding the pieces of a shattered marriage, wondering how it all went so wrong so fast. The worst part was realizing how much money she'd taken. $250, $0, our savings, our future gone. I felt numb just thinking about it. That money was supposed to go toward our kids' college fund, a house we'd bought together, our retirement. And now, it was with a man who didn't care about any of that. I started to think about how she planned it all, her lies, her manipulations. She kept insisting she loved me, that she didn't want to hurt me, but her actions told a different story. I couldn't believe she'd do this. Not just cheat, but steal from us to fund her new life. I knew I had to do something, but what? I was angry, yes, but also scared. I didn't want to lose everything, but I also couldn't just let her walk away with our money and our marriage. I started to think about legal options, about how to get back what she took, how to hold her accountable. The idea of her suing me for half the property, for the house they bought together, made my stomach turn. She was already trying to spin it like I was the bad guy, that I was trying to ruin her life. But I had the proof and I was determined to fight this. I realized I was in for a long, messy battle, and I didn't know if I was ready for it. The betrayal felt like a punch to the gut, and I knew the next steps would change everything. After that confrontation, everything spiraled even further out of control. I spent the next few days trying to piece together what little I could about her plans. I knew she was planning to leave, maybe even move out by the end of the week. The thought of her walking away with the house, with half of everything, made my blood boil. That's when I decided I needed to act fast, before she could spin any more lies or hide any more money. I hired a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, but someone who specialized in divorce and financial disputes. I needed to understand my rights, what I could do to protect myself, and what she might try to do in retaliation. During our first meeting, I handed over every piece of evidence I had: bank statements, emails, texts, even her recent credit card statements. The lawyer listened carefully, then explained that I had a pretty solid case for the stolen money, and that I could potentially fight her for the house because it was bought with joint assets. But she warned me that Emily was likely to try and claim she was entitled to half of everything, including the house, especially since she was claiming she was the primary owner now. That's when I learned about her plan to sue me for half the property. I was stunned. I didn't even know she was planning that. She was already preparing her case, probably with Mark's help, claiming she had every right to that house since it was purchased during our marriage. It was a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. I felt like I was fighting for my life, for what was left of my dignity. I was angry at her, furious that she'd go to such lengths, but I also felt a deep sense of betrayal. How could she turn everything into a legal war? How could she betray me like this and then try to take what was ours? In the meantime, I started digging into her financials more. I hired a private investigator just to see if I could find out more about her activities. What I uncovered was staggering. She'd been meeting Mark outside of work, sometimes late at night, sometimes in hotels. I found receipts for dinners, gifts, even a few secret trips. All of this was hidden from me. But the most shocking thing was the house. She'd been funneling money into it secretly without my knowledge. I found bank transfers, large deposits marked as investment, but I knew what they really were. She was putting the stolen money into that house, and she'd been planning to leave me with that house with Mark and everything we'd built. I felt like I'd been punched again. All the trust I had in her was gone. I couldn't believe she'd do this to us. I kept asking myself how I missed all the signs, how I didn't see the lies in her eyes. I was angry, yes, but also heartbroken. I never thought I'd be in this situation, fighting to save what little I had left. I started to prepare myself for the legal battle ahead. I knew she'd fight dirty, that she'd try to twist everything around, make me look like the bad guy. But I had the evidence, and I was determined to fight for what was rightfully mine. One night, after a long day of meetings and planning, I sat alone in our living room. The house was eerily quiet. I looked around at the memories we'd made, photos on the walls, the furniture we picked out together, all the little things that once made this place feel like home. Now it felt like a battlefield. I realized I had to be strong. I couldn't let her win. I had to stand my ground no matter how much it hurt. Because if I didn't fight for myself now, I'd lose everything: the house, the money, any chance of rebuilding my life. Deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. The legal fight was going to be long and exhausting. But I also knew I couldn't just let her walk away with everything. I had to prove she was a liar, a thief, and an unfaithful wife. I was ready to do whatever it took to get justice, even if it meant tearing my world apart in the process. Because sometimes, the only way to reclaim what's yours is to fight for it, no matter how dirty the battle gets. The weeks that followed were a blur of court dates, lawyer meetings, and endless sleepless nights. Emily's attitude shifted from defiant to downright malicious. She started accusing me of everything, saying I was trying to control her, that I was jealous of her success, that I was just an insecure husband who didn't deserve her. She even claimed I was abusive, which wasn't true, but she knew how to throw accusations around when she felt cornered. It was like she was trying to turn the tables, make me look like the bad guy in front of the court, and to some extent, it almost worked. She hired her own lawyer, a slick woman named Lisa who was known for defending high-profile divorce cases. Lisa was good. She knew how to spin stories, how to play the victim, how to make Emily look like she was just trying to find her happiness. Meanwhile, I was stuck with my lawyer, trying to gather enough evidence to prove that Emily had stolen the money, that she'd been unfaithful, and that she had no right to claim half the house or our assets. One of the biggest shocks came when Emily filed her lawsuit. She claimed she contributed more to the house's purchase, that she was the primary owner, and that I was trying to cheat her out of her rightful share. She even claimed I was emotionally abusive, which was laughable. I knew her game. She was trying to manipulate the situation to paint herself as the victim. But I had proof: bank transfer records, emails, witness statements from friends who saw her sneaking around with Mark. Meanwhile, I was trying to piece together a case against her for the theft. I hired a forensic accountant who uncovered that Emily had transferred the stolen $250, $0 into her own accounts, then funneled some of it into the house. It was obvious she'd planned this for months. She'd lied to me about her trips, her meetings, about everything. I'd been blind, but now I saw her for what she was: a con artist, a liar, a woman willing to destroy her own marriage for a shot at a new life with Mark. The emotional toll was crushing. I felt betrayed on every level. Every time I looked at her, I saw the woman I loved, but also a stranger who had been playing me for a fool. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, wondering how I'd let this happen, how I'd been so stupid to trust her. I started questioning everything: our memories, our conversations, the vows we made. I kept thinking about the money, about the house, about the future I thought we had. All gone now, replaced with bitterness and regret. One day I found a letter she'd left me, An angry, bitter note where she accused me of being an absent husband, of not being ambitious enough, of holding her back. She called me insecure and controlling, said she deserved happiness, and that she'd be better off without me. That letter was the final straw. I realized I couldn't keep fighting her, not just for the money or the house, but for my own sanity. I'd given her everything, my love, my trust, my life, and she'd thrown it all away for a man who saw her as nothing more than a trophy. So I made a decision. I was done trying to save this marriage. I was going to fight for my rights, for the money she stole, for the house that was supposed to be our future. But I also knew that walking away was the only way I could start to heal. I'd had enough of her lies, her manipulations, her betrayal. It was time to put an end to this nightmare and reclaim what was mine. The court date was set. I remember sitting there, feeling like I was about to step into a battlefield I didn't fully understand. My heart was pounding, but I had my evidence, my lawyer by my side, and a resolve I'd never felt before. I knew that whatever the outcome, I'd come out of this stronger. Because when everything's been taken from you, the only thing left is to stand up and fight back. And that's exactly what I was going to do. The courtroom was a mess of tension and barely concealed hostility. Emily sat there, her face tight and smug, as if she was already victorious. Mark wasn't even present, probably smart enough to stay out of the mess that his mistress had created. My lawyer laid out the evidence meticulously. The bank statements, the transfers, the emails, the forged documents Emily had tried to hide. We had everything on our side, and I could see the wheels turning in the judge's head. Emily's lawyer, Lisa, tried to spin her story, claiming that Emily was entitled to half the property because she had contributed to the home's value in her own way, though she never explained how she'd paid for the house with stolen money. She also argued that Emily's relationship with Mark was purely professional, despite the mountain of evidence proving otherwise. Lisa was doing her best to paint Emily as a victim of me, of circumstances, of her own choices. But the judge wasn't buying it. I took the stand and told my side straight. I explained how I'd trusted Emily, how I'd supported her dreams, how I'd worked hard to provide a good life for us. I detailed how she'd stolen from us, how she'd lied, how she'd manipulated everyone around her. I saw her sneer at me, but I didn't care. I was speaking my truth. I told the court that she'd been unfaithful, that she'd lied about her relationship with Mark, and that she'd taken our savings to buy house with him. I explained how she'd been planning this for months, how she'd been sneaking around behind my back. The judge listened intently, asking questions, making notes. It was clear that the evidence was stacking against Emily. She looked furious, then resigned, then angry as she realized she was losing. The courtroom was tense, and I could feel my heart pounding, but I stayed focused. I knew this was the fight for my future, for my dignity. When the judge finally spoke, she ruled that Emily had committed theft and that she had no claim to the house or the stolen money. She ordered Emily to pay back every cent she took, plus interest. The house was awarded to me as it was purchased with joint funds, and Emily was ordered to pay my legal costs. She looked stunned, and I felt a strange mixture of relief and emptiness. I'd won the case, but I knew the emotional scars wouldn't heal overnight. The aftermath was just as brutal. Emily left the courtroom furious, screaming that she'd fight this, that she'd appeal, that she'd ruin me if she had to. Mark disappeared from the scene entirely. I was left to pick up the pieces of my shattered life. I felt exhausted, drained, and betrayed beyond words. But at least now I had clarity, justice in a sense had been served. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd lost something irreplaceable. The woman I loved, the life we'd built, the trust that had once held us together. The house, my home, was mine again. I moved out of the bedroom she'd shared with Mark and started to think about how to rebuild, alone this time. I knew I'd need counseling, support, maybe even therapy to get through the emotional fallout. But I also knew one thing: I'd never let someone do this to me again. Never lose myself in someone else's lies and manipulations. I'd learned the hard way that trust isn't something you give blindly. It's something you earn, and when it's broken, it's nearly impossible to repair. Looking back, I realize how much I underestimated her, how much I ignored the signs, how much I wanted to believe in us. But I also know I have to move forward. I've learned that sometimes you have to fight for what's right, even if it costs you everything. And that's exactly what I did. Now I'm just trying to put the pieces back together, piece by piece, knowing that the scars will always stay, but so will my strength to survive. It's been a few months since everything came crashing down, and honestly, I'm still trying to figure out how I survived it all. The house is finally paid off, and I've moved into a small apartment nearby, somewhere I can breathe without feeling suffocated by the ghosts of what used to be. I spend a lot of time alone now, reflecting on everything. I won't lie, there are days when I wake up and feel the weight of betrayal so heavy I think I'll never get past it. But other days, I realize I've grown stronger, that I've learned things I never thought I would. Looking back, I see how blindly I trusted Emily. I see the signs I ignored, the little things that should have been red flags but weren't because I wanted to believe in her. But I also see how she used that trust to manipulate me, to steal from us, to build a new life with Mark while I was left picking up the pieces. It's hard not to feel anger, bitterness, and even shame for not seeing it sooner. But I remind myself that no one is perfect. Sometimes, love blinds us until it's too late. The legal battle was draining, emotionally and financially. But it taught me a valuable lesson about boundaries, about not ignoring the warning signs, and about the importance of protecting what's yours. I learned that people can surprise you in the worst ways, and that sometimes the only way to reclaim your dignity is to stand up and fight for it. I also learned how fragile trust is, and how easily it can be broken with lies, greed, and selfishness. Now, I try to focus on rebuilding my life, on finding happiness again, on trusting myself more than anyone else. I've started therapy, which helps me process the anger and sadness. I've reconnected with friends who remind me of who I am outside of this mess. And I've realized that, despite everything, I still have hope. Hope that someday I'll find genuine love again, someone who values honesty, loyalty, and respect. To anyone out there going through something similar, I just want to say this: trust is precious, but it's also something you have to protect. Pay attention to the red flags, listen to your gut, and don't be afraid to fight for yourself. Because the truth is, no one is coming to save you. Sometimes you have to save yourself. And in doing so, you might just discover that you're stronger than you ever thought possible.